Young, talented, and at the top of her fame, 22-year-old Christina Grimmie was the very essence of what a modern teen idol should be.
Yo guys, what's up? Team Grimmie, you guys rock so hard. You guys are awesome, got a lot of new music coming up for you guys. Yeah, just leave a bunch of requests in the comment section.
But June 10th, 2016, during an autograph signing at her concert in Orlando, she was shot 4 times by an obsessed fan. So just who was Christina? And what had led her to fame, and ultimately to this awful tragedy?
Christina Grimmie was of Italian-Romanian descent, and she was born into a very loving home in Malton, New Jersey. And that's where she grew up with her brother Marcus, who she always remained close to. In fact, he worked for her as a road manager when she was touring. Clearly this was a close, loving family, and she had a happy childhood.
Christina's talent was evident from a very young age.
She grew up and she was immensely talented, and she was a great singer, and her dad got her piano lessons, but she largely self-taught. This was somebody that had done it all by herself.
Her passion for music was undeniable, but there was more to Christina than just musical talent.
To be a rising star, as she definitely was, you have to be more than just a great voice. She had a unique ability to connect with her audience, and that's really what makes a star. That's what makes an artist. And she was one of the very first, I think, of a generation of artists who started to use YouTube as a way of communicating with her fans.
Hello, it's Christina. I'm going to be doing a cover of Elastic Heart by Sia. Amazing song.
Much like a lot of teenagers, she started doing her own covers, and they had a massive impact. One song that she did with another YouTube star ended up having 120 million views. And also she had incredible sort of fan engagement, where she'd speak to fans and she'd get them on side and chat to them, and she'd reply to their comments. And she became very, very successful on YouTube. She had 3.5 million subscribers. And this is all contained from her own room.
You shout it loud, but I can't hear a word you say. I'm talking loud, not saying much.
And she got really big quite quickly online, and it was all through her own sort of hard work, and it was her own ingenuity.
Friday, new video, all the time. Great. Love you guys, bye!
She was doing everything right, I suppose, on the path to fame and getting her own music out and having success.
Couldn't lie, couldn't lie, couldn't lie. Everything that kills me makes me feel alive. I've been losing sleep.
She gained huge popularity via her YouTube videos, and she was just generally seen as a talented, warm and vivacious woman who had everything going for her.
We'll be counting stars.
But it was when Grimmie auditioned for The Voice that she really shot to national fame.
Christina auditioned for the 2014 issue of The Voice in America, and she walked on stage and sang Wrecking Ball by Miley Cyrus. And so impactful was her version of the song that 3 of the judges immediately turned round before she'd finished the first verse. And that was Shakira, Usher, Adam Levine from Maroon 5. So you can really see the instant talent this girl had.
Christina made it all the way to the final show that year, eventually finishing 3rd.
And with that, the audience followed her journey. They saw her, and they saw her wanting to be a star. They joined in with the highs and lows of that. They really connected with her. And I think that that is Christina's probably most valuable talent. Not only is she a great singer, she can really connect with an audience.
Christina's social network and her media presence was so large, the fact that she had so many YouTube videos online, it was great for her fan base, but it also unfortunately has this darker side where it increases the risk of having a stalker, because there's more fodder for that person to latch onto, to feel like they know Christina, like they're personally connected, when in actuality it's just a fantasy.
And ultimately, I think that's what led to the obsession that Kevin Lobel developed for her.
Kevin Loibel wanted to change Christina's life.
Kevin Lobel was a 27-year-old who lived with his brother and his father. And what we know about him is actually very little. And that in itself is very telling. Everybody who knew him said that he lived the life of a hermit.
He had been going through school, and there were some unusual things about him, but nothing that raised a ton of eyebrows for particularly his family. When he was about 21 years old, his mother was pronounced dead after an accidental aspirin overdose. So we can imagine that really impacted his life.
And his father had entered into another relationship, which was rather fractious on the part of, well, both him and Kevin, because the police had been called to various domestic violence incidents between the girlfriend and Kevin Lobel's father and Kevin himself. One very sad aspect of this case for me is that the people who Lobel lived with didn't know that he had a growing obsession with Christina Grimmie, because they didn't know what he was doing when he was alone in his bedroom for hours and hours at a time. As much as he was withdrawn from other people, the people around him were withdrawn from him, and that shows you just how isolated he was and just how lonely he probably felt. In fact, the only person who did enter into Lobel's bedroom was, by her television appearances and YouTube videos, was Christina Grimmie.
What Kevin did next could leave no one in doubt later about his intentions. He applied to buy guns.
He was able to buy 2 Glocks. He bought one and then waited 5 days to collect it. He eventually collected it 11 days before the subsequent murder. And then in that time, that wasn't enough for him. He went out and purchased another Glock, again completely legally, collected it, and then set about this journey where he would go to Orlando and attack this woman.
And he'd clearly pre-bought the ticket, so he had an intention to go there, and he also had an intention to take weapons there. 2 guns and 1 hunting knife. Now that's a significant amount of weapons that this 27-year-old took with him. So what's clear to me is that he went to that concert with murder in mind.
Lobel left his house on June 10, 2016, and made his way to Orlando by taxi.
Lobel took the taxi journey, which was an hour and a half from his home to Orlando, and he checked himself into a very expensive hotel, but he didn't take anything with him. He went with a very specific focus and intent. He was going to kill her and very likely kill himself also at the scene.
But how had things come to this without being noticed by his family or friends?
There are always warning signs, and it's very easy to spot them in hindsight.
Right before Kevin left for Orlando, in his last shift at work with Corey at Best Buy, he said things that Corey later on thought were, very grim, depressing, things like telling him he was his best friend and goodbye, and he would see him again in the afterlife, and things that Corey just felt were unusual, but he didn't take too heavily because he could never imagine in a million years what Kevin was about to do.
Lobel had told the friend that he was feeling tired and he was ready to ascend. That's a very strange use of words, but what he's saying is, I'm tired. So my mood is low and I am ready to die. If somebody says that they are ready to die, that will usually invite a response of, hey, come on now, tell me what's wrong, let's talk about this. Tell me how you're feeling, what has led to this? But it didn't in this case. It just seemed to pass by, noticed, but not actioned. I just think it's very sad that nobody reached out to him in that moment.
With no intervention to prevent what would happen next, Kevin carried on with his deadly plan.
When Kevin arrived at that hotel at the Marriott after having traveled from St. Petersburg, Florida to Orlando, you can imagine he knew what he was going to do. He had been planning this for weeks. There would be a mix of anxiety and excitement, anxiety over knowing that he would have to murder Christina, but Also excitement. He didn't see this as a negative thing. He saw it as saving her, letting her be reunited with God versus this horrible person, which could, in his mind, have represented the devil. It's akin to what we see with family annihilators. Sometimes when people are getting divorced or separating, a husband or wife will feel like, if I can't have that family, then nobody can. And they act out in such an extreme and delusional, detached from reality way by killing their whole family. And you can see that almost in the same way here. He would rather have her dead than imagine her with anybody else. So he wanted to make sure that she was dead. Multiple guns, multiple magazines, just to make sure that he had enough to ensure the kill occurred when he went to see her in Orlando.